Hello, everyone. Time really flies, and I would like to welcome you on our sixth Reactive online meetup. I'm really excited that you made the decision to stay with us for an hour and a little bit longer today to hear two great topics from two great speakers. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andrej Skok. I'm a developer in Vacuumlabs, which is a company which stayed behind the ReactiveConf since its beginning in 2015. Vacuumlabs focuses mainly on providing flexible and reliable software engineers to clients all over the world, pretty much from LA to Tokyo. Before my presentation or presentation of our speakers, just few notes from organizers. And the first is Q&A. There is an option to ask in the chat here on a Zoom webinar. So feel free to use it anytime during the presentation. We will get to all the questions after the talk if something will be left unanswered during the presentation. So no worries there. Secondly, there is a Slack channel, reactiveonlinemeetups.slack.com. You can ask questions there. So feel free even after the talk. I am there, speakers are there, organizers are there. We will value your feedback there, and you can post your questions regarding the topics at any time, and we will try to answer them all. So feel free. Now, let's welcome our speakers. Today, there is James Quick and Martin Splitt with us with two great topics. I'm really excited to hear them because I read the synopsis and it looks really great. And we will start with our meta talk. James, are you here? How are you?
Coming off mute. There we go. I'm doing well. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today during your lunch, I believe.
Yeah.
It is in US.
Yep,
so sacrificing your food for us. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
So what's more to say? Stage is yours. I'm looking forward to how I will unstuck myself. So let's
Sounds
go for
good.
it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Let me share my screen. Cool. All right, let me start my timer to make sure that I'm on time, and then yeah, ready to go. So for me, growing up, my family spent most of their time feeling stuck in their careers. And honestly, I think most of the time they wouldn't even consider themselves to have careers. They might have had jobs, but not careers. See, for my family, a job was just a job. It was something necessary to support their family, something necessary to put food on the table, not necessarily something associated with happiness. And this was especially true for my dad. He was one of the smartest people that I've ever met. He got his law degree. He practiced law for a while, and he realized that he didn't enjoy it. And so he quit. And this was kind of noble, the idea of leaving something that you don't quite enjoy to go and find something that makes you happier. The problem was he didn't end up sacrificing that career as a lawyer for happiness. Ultimately, he just never found either. He never seemed like he had a job that he enjoyed. He never seemed like he was on a path to somewhere, and he never really made any money. So this talk is about some of the ups and downs that I've dealt with as a professional. And I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned in the hopes that you can use them to strive towards happiness in your life and your career, whatever that may look like for you. So this story is going to start out at the beginning of my career. I started my career at Microsoft fresh out of college, and my job was a technical evangelist. My job was to get out and speak and give presentations and workshops. And so at the age of 22, I found myself giving presentations to audiences full of developers, many of whom had been writing code longer than I had been alive. And as you can imagine, this is a pretty uncomfortable feeling for me, and I suffered a lot from imposter syndrome. I wondered, what can I possibly offer someone who's been writing code for 20 plus years, maybe longer than I've been alive, if I've just recently graduated from college myself? But the more I did this, the more talks that I gave, I started to realize that people were showing up to hear me speak because there was something that I knew that they didn't, that they wanted to come and learn from me. And I started to build up a lot of confidence. And at the end of my first year, in my review with my manager, who I really enjoyed working with, I got a glowing review, and that led to a pretty big bonus. And at that point, it was time to celebrate. And so I took the money that I got in that bonus from that first year, and I bought a ring to propose to my wife. I'd used that ring to then propose to my wife, and I got married about a year later. And with all this confidence and so many cool things happening in my life, I started to think about what happiness looked like in my career. And I realized there was one thing in particular that I was missing. I had always had this dream of living in New York City. My wife and I had visited a couple times in college. We were just infatuated with the city, and that was something that ultimately I wanted to do. So I mentioned that to my manager. I was in South Florida at the time, and there just happened to be someone that left the team in New York City. So 3 weeks later, my wife and I moved to New York. This is actually the view from our rooftop in Brooklyn overlooking the New York City skyline. And so with that move came a new surroundings, obviously, a new team, and then also a new manager. And unfortunately, I never felt like that manager was really paying attention to me. And I'll give you a couple of examples why. During our one-on-ones, he would often be getting food through the drive-through at McDonald's, or he would be picking up coffee at Starbucks. And I just felt like he was never really paying attention to me. So fast forward to the end of my career at Microsoft, about a year and a half later, when I had my final review with my manager, and I was going into it anticipating I had done my job and I had done my job well, and I expected my review and my bonus to kind of correlate to that, just kind of right in the middle, like I did as good as anybody else kind of thing. And when I got my bonus, I was shocked. It was significantly lower than what I expected. And to make matters worse, my manager couldn't articulate to me why. He couldn't say you didn't do this, or you didn't do this well enough, or in comparison to the team, you didn't do these things well. And he never really said any of that stuff throughout the year as well. So this was a complete shock. And so I felt hurt and I felt shocked. And most importantly, I felt like everything about that situation was out of my control. And I realized two really important things during that. One is that no matter how good or bad your manager is, ultimately, what you do with your career and where you go in your career is up to you. You have to be your own conductor. Wherever it is that you want to go, it's on you to get there. You can certainly have help along the way, and you can have people that may not help you so much, but ultimately, it's up to you. And two, I realized that I should have been more vocal. I should have been asking more direct questions. I should have been asking questions more frequently. I shouldn't have let myself be in the situation to be surprised when that final review came. So you might be wondering, I mentioned that was at the end of my career at Microsoft. You might be wondering why I left an amazing company at Microsoft, one of the top tech companies in the world. And what I haven't explained yet is that in May of 2016, standing on that same rooftop in Brooklyn, overlooking the New York City skyline, my dad called me and told me that he was diagnosed with cancer and had 6 months to live. And my wife and I at this time had already been talking a little bit about what the next stage in our life was going to be. We knew New York City wasn't a forever thing. We wanted to buy a house and kind of settle down. So we decided we would move to Memphis, and I would be able to spend what time my dad had left with him. As part of that process, I was looking internally at Microsoft to see if I could find some sort of role that would make sense for me to do in Memphis. And long story short, it just didn't work out. So I had interned previously in college at FedEx, and I reached out to my previous manager and said, "Hey, I'm moving to Memphis. I would love to come work at FedEx." And she said, "Well, this is perfect timing because we are about to hire several positions because we've got a lot of work that needs to be done." And so it seemed like everything was kind of coming together and was going to work out relatively okay. But it didn't quite go as expected. When I moved to Memphis, my dad passed away about a week later. So I thought I was going to have 4 to 5 months time to spend with him. I only got a week, and I'm very thankful for that time. But at the end of the day, it wasn't quite what I expected. And then two, the process to start the interviews at FedEx took a lot longer than I ever expected. So when my dad passed away, there was a lot of logistical things, a lot of emotional things, but a lot of logistical things that came down to me to take care of. My mom had passed away a few years before. So I had a house to take care of, to clean out. I had a car to put in my name, and I had all these things to figure out. And so a month or two after that, my wife started to ask me, hey, have you heard anything from FedEx? And I would say, I'm just waiting on them to tell me when the interview is. And a month later, she would say the same thing, and I would say the same thing back to her. And then a month after that, she said, you know how we like to have food and wear clothes and all these things? Those things cost money. Have you heard anything from FedEx? And I realized that I couldn't control how quickly I was able to have the interview with FedEx. But what I could control was being damn sure that I was as prepared for the interview as I could possibly be when it did come. So I started investing in myself. I started watching YouTube videos. I started taking Udemy courses. I started building portfolios and projects, and I started hanging out in the community and investing in the people around me. And a couple of months later, I had my interview with FedEx, and I talked about all those things that I've been working on and learning. And I didn't know this at the time, but the people who interviewed me walked away from the interview saying, there's no doubt we absolutely want to hire that person. So looking back, I realized with all the emotional things that were going on in my life at the time, from a career standpoint, I needed to focus on the things that I could control. Again, I couldn't control when that interview would come. I couldn't control when they would call me about the interview, but I could control how prepared I was for that interview at the time. And I was, and I ended up getting the job. And I started my new career at FedEx. And when I joined FedEx, they talked a lot about something called SAFe. And SAFe stands for the Scaled Agile Framework. It's basically a framework around how to do agile at really big companies, hence Scaled Agile Framework. And the way this worked is there was 5 2-week sprints. And during that 5th one, you're supposed to plan for the next 5 and then go and execute and then come back and plan and kind of iterate on that. And that 5th sprint is actually called the Innovation and Planning Sprint, the IP sprint. And so what you're supposed to do is definitely plan, but you're also supposed to be embracing innovation. And everyone at FedEx was talking about how we should be doing hackathons and we should be learning and experimenting and being creative. And I realized that no one was doing that. So in one of our planning events in a room full of not quite this many people, but 60 or 70 people, I stood up and I said, hey, we talk about this. No one's actually doing this at all. I would like to try something. And so I ended up getting support to have either 2 or 3 days, depending on the activity, to have a hackathon during this IP sprint so that people could have a free space to get away from their regular desk, to be creative, to experiment, to build, to learn new things, and really kind of push the envelope of our knowledge in terms of technology at FedEx. And that led to some pretty cool stuff. We got to work with some IoT stuff, and we built like a demo that we were able to show off to the entire group. And with that, as this started to get more and more momentum, I got a lot of positive feedback, especially from upper management. Congratulations, great job, kudos, well done, all that kind of stuff. But the thing that really stuck out is someone saying, thank you for being vocal. And I looked back on my experience at Microsoft and thinking back about how I wasn't vocal with my manager at the time. And I realized that I had now taken something that I had learned in the past and applied it to my new role and was getting lots of appreciation and recognition and respect from my peers and my management and upper management. So a couple of months later, my manager had a career discussion with me. She wanted to know between 2 different paths, going in the management route or continuing to grow as an individual contributor, which one would I be more interested in? And I told her that I was not particularly interested in the day-to-day work of being a manager, but I was interested in being a leader in technology. I spent all my time outside of work, being in the community and paying attention to what's new and all these things. I wanted to take that knowledge and apply that and help make decisions and help teach people along the way. So a couple of days later, she brought me into her office and she said there was an architect position available in the organization of 60 or 70 people, and she would like to give me that role. Now, at the time, this was not just a promotion, this was a double promotion. It would have skipped a level in between. And this sounded like exactly what I wanted. So at the age of 27, I don't know this for sure, but probably one of, if not the youngest architects in the entire company at FedEx. And so I got to do a lot of cool stuff. I got to be in meetings where we made technical decisions, and I got to give my recommendations, and I got to draw really cool diagrams. This is actually a legit diagram of teaching someone how a system worked. We ended up taking trips to Europe, and I got to spend time with my team in Europe, and my wife came over and got to meet me in Europe, and we got to have fun. And did I mention I got to travel in first class to do that, which is pretty sweet. So all of that was going pretty well, but eventually that architect position became more and more about meetings. And for me, these meetings didn't seem relevant. They were about other projects that I didn't specifically work on. And I felt like my time was wasted. When I would go to work in the morning, I was less excited about going to work. When I would come home in the evening, I was much more excited to leave work and to go home. And during the day, I was very distracted thinking about the things that I truly enjoyed, creating videos, creating content, teaching people. And so I started to kind of look around at a lot of the people at FedEx, some of the older generation at FedEx, and I started to sound like them. I was complaining about things, but they had also decided this was kind of as good as it gets. Things are the way they are, and they were just going to ride out their career at FedEx and retire and have a good life and all those kind of things, but they still weren't happy necessarily at their job. And I realized that mentality sounded a lot like how my dad would have looked at his jobs that he had had over the years. This is just what it is. I get paid. It's where I'm going to finish my career. And I realized that's not the part of my dad that I wanted to be. So I ended up realizing I couldn't focus, or I couldn't control how many meetings I was in, but I could control what my job was. So I ended up leaving FedEx, and I started my career at Auth0. And now I get to do all of this amazing stuff every day, and it's exactly what I wanted to do. And then a thing that I learned at FedEx was to pay attention to your mood. If you are unhappy with something in your life or your career, it's up to you to make that change, to take what you can control, to be vocal, to be your own conductor, but you have to pay attention to your mood to realize when you need that. And I posted something about this on Twitter, and someone very appropriately commented, that's really great advice, but not everyone has the privilege to just leave a job or find a job the next day. And I wanted to address this because this was very true. This was extremely true. And so you can't just leave your job or find a new job overnight. But what you can do is you can take an online course to develop your skills. You can watch a couple of YouTube videos to develop your skills. You can reach out to a mentor to ask for advice. You can build out your portfolio, and you can attend community events, and you can invest in the community and network, because you never know which one of those people might lead to your next position. So at this point, if I could talk to my dad, I would say, don't procrastinate. It's never too late. And pay attention to where you are and how you feel and how happy you are, and think about where you want to be and what happiness looks like for you, and mind that gap. Find out what that gap is and take baby steps to get there. So my name is James Q. Quick, and I am incredibly happy with where I am in my life and my career. But I owe it to myself to reflect on that and check in with myself every couple of months just to make sure I'm on the right track. And if not, take baby steps to get back on track. And so do you. Thank you. And I think we'll have some time for questions too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your talk, James. It was really inspiring. I will have to set up a timer for each month, so it will remind me about the question, are you happy with your job? Yeah, that would be really a great idea. Like you can trademark it. It's yours as
I
a
will
gift
take that and run with it,
that you gave the talk. Yeah, regarding the QA, that there were probably no questions during the talk. I have one question, although
sure.
It was really inspiring. Thank you a lot. How come that you had a motivation after you left the New York, which it seemed like a city you loved, and one of your parents passed away, and you found a motivation to just study the online courses on YouTube And for me, it sounds like, okay, this is the time when I want to just stay at home for a month and do literally nothing, just be sad.
Yeah.
So how come? Like this is some incredible piece of self-motivation which I see here, and it seems like something which I would not be able to overcome maybe, or it would be really hard to just do this self-reflection
Sure.
or to have this moment.
Yeah, well, I think so. A couple of things that are important to remember: the amount of time that it took from my father passing away to starting at FedEx was about 6 months. So when you said you wanted to like lay around the house and be sad for a month, like I certainly did that too. There was a lot of time in there, but I think, like I said, there was just like my wife pushing and kind of questioning me to make sure that like with everything going on, I'm still keeping track of like I need to be working towards a career. It gives you a distraction. I think for me at that point, I just started getting into web development and I really just fell in love with it. And that made it a lot easier to keep going, but it also was a distraction. I felt like I was working towards something. I felt like I had control over something. And that just made it that much easier to continue to work with it. And then obviously it paid off when it came to the interview because I had so much that I could talk about, so much experience from that, from like longer than 6 months, but especially in those couple of months. And then projects and portfolio things that I had built that made it so much easier to go in and really nail that interview. So yeah, I certainly struggled during that time. It was a tough time, or it was definitely a very tough time. But just finding something that I could latch onto, that I could control, that I could invest in, and feel like I'm making progress was the reason that I was able to keep doing it, and then eventually land the job at FedEx.
That absolutely makes sense. Thank you. We have in the meantime there are some questions from Jesse Hall. Here is the question: why are you so awesome?
I don't know, Jesse or Code Stacker. If you're not familiar with Jesse, he's Code Stacker on YouTube. You should definitely go check him out. He's got screenshots of his courses in this slide deck, by the way.
I will.
But I appreciate that.
Answer is that by nature.
Yes, just naturally, it just happens.
Yeah. Yeah, damn, there is no chance for you, Jesse. I will check it out. I'm just kidding. Yeah, and there is one more question from Lukáš. What can I do once I realize I'm unhappy in a current job? How to find out position I can enjoy more? How to build an interview over opportunities that I probably don't know yet?
Yeah, I think there's several things that come to mind. One, for me at the time, I had never done web development, and I just happened to kind of try out a course on Udemy, and I ended up falling in love with it. And that was after having taken 3 or 4 previous ones on like mobile development and other things. And that was just the thing that clicked. So I think one thing you can definitely do is just kind of expose yourself to more things. I don't know if people here are traditionally developers in the audience or what people do, but if you're a developer, maybe there's other pieces of development that you can experiment with and see if you enjoy. If you are a naturally social person as a developer, there are roles like technical evangelists, or developer advocates, which is what I am now, where you get to have this really good mix of being social and giving presentations and talks and stuff, while also still being very technical and getting to write code. I think another way you do that is by building your network. Like it sounds odd maybe, but Twitter is a huge place to invest in the developer community and follow people who are interesting to you, who are doing different types of roles, and you can kind of see what they do and how they do it. And I reach out to lots of people that I don't know to ask them things about their job. If there's something you think you might be interested in, find someone who does that and reach out to them and use them as a mentor and build out your network, because you never know which one of those random jobs or which one of those random companies or which one of those random people will help lead to your next job in the future. So just becoming overall more aware by being in meetups like this, by being online on Twitter, by having your people that you hang out with and you trust either in person or online, you have that many more people to bounce ideas around with, and then kind of find out more about their careers and see how that might help you out in the future.
Thanks. Hopefully it was sufficient answer for Lucas. Daniel is asking, hello, thanks for sharing your experiences. My question is, what would be an optimal job for a junior with 2 to 3 years of experience in coding?
Sure. I mean, the cliche answer is it obviously depends. It depends on what your particular interests are. For me, coming out of college with no experience, for me to work at Microsoft as a technical evangelist was certainly an optimal job for me, but it was not very much programming. It was more about this side, the speaking and the presentations and stuff. So that's very different than the route that most people would traditionally take. So in terms of you specifically, if you have any idea of what is it that you want to do long term, then you kind of backtrack from there. If I wanted to eventually be a speaker, a professional speaker, then getting into a technical evangelist role was really helpful for that. If my goal was to be the most technical and the best software developer in the world, then I would want to find a role that does software development every day. So I would say, just think about the things that you're most interested in and what that might look like in 10 years, and then try to backtrack from there. And same or similar to the answer previously, talk to people, ask people who do these jobs and see how they started and what their first role was or their second role. And then you can kind of gauge how that fits for you, and you can do your research and find companies and opportunities, and then apply hopefully for something that puts you down the baby steps towards your longer term goal of whatever that path is for you.
Yep. The backtracking seems really reasonable. Hope, Daniel, that the answer was sufficient. Thank you, James. That's all for the Q&A. So that's it. Thank you, James. Thank you very much. It was really inspiring. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day. Or if you have time, the next talk. So feel free to stay here.
Sure. Yeah, I'll hang out. And if anybody has any questions or anything later on, feel free to reach out on Twitter or something.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we will move on. We will move on to our next speaker and the dev talk, which will be done by Martin Splitt. Martin, are you here? How are you?
Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm doing pretty well. How are you, Andrej?
I'm also pretty well.
Awesome.
Pretty great evening.
We had a pretty great first talk. That was awesome.
Yeah. I always love that. There's the first talk, which will somehow, even when it's evening, it will inspire you to do something with yourself and do a little bit more before I will go to sleep. So really great. But you have also some great topic prepared about the technical SEO. This is a topic which I'm really actively solving during the day as a developer. So I'm really looking forward to this. Awesome. I hope that I will get to some deep knowledge, and awesome. It will be some deep dive. So looking forward. Thank you very much, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks. So it won't be that much of a deep dive because most people are not aware of what we are talking about when we talk about technical SEO. So this is a bit of an intro, but there is like a top list of things that I keep seeing people do wrong, even though that sometimes makes me very, very happy, sad that people are still doing this wrong. It's Google policy that I can't share my slides, so you definitely want to pay attention, and do feel free to ask questions throughout. I'll happily try to answer them all at the end. Cool. So now, as Andrej said, we will be talking about technical SEO. But before we dive into technical SEO, let's actually figure out what SEO means. Not everyone is familiar with the term. It's search engine optimization. Sounds great. Optimizing for search engines, simple. But then if you ask people what that means, you tend to get two answers. Either, oh, it's very easy, you just like buy some links. That's a bad answer, by the way. Or, oh, this is all just like bullshit. Also actually a pretty bad answer. But if you ask people who know a little bit more about SEO and you let them talk for a while, you sometimes feel like you are looking at a very scary, complicated phenomenon like the weather, right? The weather is quite interesting and fascinating and broad, lots of things happening in the same time, and different things can go wrong, and then you have a thunderstorm. SEO is relatively similar. It's a little bit like developers. If you ask someone, are you a developer? And they say yes, you don't really know what they do. They might be working in embedded systems and build control software for cars or rockets, or maybe they work in game development, maybe they do mobile apps, maybe they do web. There's a huge variety of stuff that can be done in software development, and such is SEO as well. There are more technical parts to it and less technical parts to it. So if we think about SEO as a developer, I'm a developer. I'm a web developer. That's what I have been doing for quite some time. I have done other development work, like actually embedded development as well. But as a web developer, I thought SEO doesn't really touch my job. It's not really what I need to be aware of or dealing with. But then again, if you think about it, as web developers, what do? We build websites for people to consume. People being the keyword, our users, right? But there is another group that we are kind of catering to, or we should be catering to some degree, which is search engines. Search engines you can imagine as undocumented or poorly documented APIs that are interacting with our content to understand our content. These search engines usually try to emulate the behavior of a user, but they don't do that to 100% accuracy. So, and that's not even what they want to do. They have specific reasons to act the way they act. So to understand this less well-documented API, which is a search engine like Google search or any of your other favorite search engines, we need to understand what this does. And roughly every search engine is made out of 4 parts, more or less. The first part is the crawler. That's the thing that requests things from your server. It's literally making HTTP requests and a few more other things, like trying to not overwhelm your server and bring your website down in the process of requesting things from your website server, as well as making sure that they are not accessing things you don't want them to access. All this kind of stuff happens in the crawler, prioritizing what to crawl, because it turns out the web is quite big. It doesn't make sense to just crawl everything all the time, unless you want to build the world's largest cloud that just crawls websites, which is ridiculous. So that's the first part. We fetch things from your server. That's the crawler. Then we need to understand, what is the thing that we've got, right? What is this website about? That's the question. What might someone look for where this website would be a good place to go? If your website is about cats, then that's only the surface of it, right? If your website is about cat pictures or kitten pictures, or is your website about dietary tricks and tips for unhealthy cats? Is it about veterinaries for cats? Is it about, I don't know, vacation care for cats? Who knows? There's many, many different things around the topic of cats. So someone looking for what's the best cat food might not be interested in your website if your website just offers cat pictures, even though I would say that cat pictures are always fantastic. So that's the indexer. But then we have a list of things for a topic given. And now we have a query. Let's say like cheapest cafe. Now there's many websites with cheap cafes that I could go to and work from, for instance, or good cafe to work from. Now we need to bring this list of URLs that we have in a certain order so that we can show you what we think is the best hit for you and what's the second best website and the third best website for this query at the time, at the moment that you're asking this. And this is tricky. It turns out to model what is a good website for a given query, for a given intention that you want, like the best cafe to work from, is dependent on many, many different factors. We look at hundreds of ranking factors in this case. A few of them are known and public, such as if your website has HTTPS, that is a ranking factor. It's not the most important, because a website about a cafe that you can work in that has HTTPS, but is in, let's say, Oslo. I'm in Zurich. It's in Oslo. That cafe doesn't help me right now where I'm in Zurich, right? It's not helpful. So maybe the website that has HTTPS, the cafe website with HTTPS in Oslo, is less helpful than the Zurich cafe website that does not have HTTPS. So it can't be the one factor, obviously, but page speed, HTTPS, mobile friendliness, security, a bunch of other things are things that we look at, but also obviously how good is the content. So again, we grab back to content understanding. And then also when people talk about ranking, they often misunderstand how ranking works in general. So as I said, if I'm searching for a best cafe to work in right now in Zurich, I'll probably get results in Zurich. But then if I'm in a different city, the rankings will look different. It also differs on which language setting I'm looking at. A website that offers English when I'm searching in English might be better than a website that is in German or whatever, right? So rankings are very subjective and very, very tricky, and they can move. Because if you have a fantastic website and you're ranking first for what you care about, you offer vacuum cleaners and you are ranking #1 for vacuum cleaners. If I'm searching for best vacuum cleaner, you show up, that's great. But now someone else makes a better website. So then you lose that ranking. And it's not entirely up to you. It is about the fact that the web keeps changing. So ranking is a bit of a hit and miss. And last but not least, we do have to have our own web servers that are actually like taking the ranked results and serve them to the users and show you the web search results that you know when you go to the search engine of your choice. Well, serving basically is entirely our problem. That's not up for you to deal with. But I do think as developers, we do have a lot of influence over the first 2 stages, and that's crawling and indexing. For crawling, well, we chose, probably, hopefully, chose the URL structure, how our website is reachable. We chose the technical setup, probably. How do we host? Where do we host? Do we use a CDN? Do we not use a CDN? These things can make a difference in terms of how much we crawl. If I'm using a Raspberry Pi under my computer and Googlebot tries to fetch 1,000 pages in 1 second, this Raspberry Pi might actually not hold up too well. So Googlebot will be like, oh, okay, I'll fetch less pages next time, which is a problem if I have 10 million products and I'm a huge online reseller. If on the other hand, I use a proper stable server setup and I can fetch 1,000 things at the same time, and Googlebot will be like, well, maybe I try 2,000 things next time, which means we are seeing your content faster, usually, or update your content faster. That's one thing that we have under control, more or less, usually, as developers. We get to choose more or less our deployment setup. Hopefully. If you can't, you should talk to your ops people, maybe. And in the indexer, well, if we are making technical decisions that lead to Googlebot not seeing our content and basically flying blind and not knowing what our website contains because maybe our JavaScript has a bug and actually all the content that we fetch from a GraphQL API doesn't even make it into the browser for a Googlebot, then that means that we can't see your content. So we don't know what this is about. And if we don't know what this is about, what is your website about? We don't know, it's an empty page. Then that means we can't really put it in the index and we can't really rank it for anything because we don't know what the website is about. Not great. Another thing is, if we are making decisions that make the website very, very slow, that's something that we do pick up in ranking. It's a ranking factor, website speed. So if we make our websites very, very, very slow, because we are using lots of JavaScript or we are using caching inefficiently, and so on and so forth, that might also impact how the indexer thinks of our website. So that's something that we have control over. What you shouldn't worry too much about is ranking. That's just dragons. It's all dragons, lots of dragons. Of course, it's lots of factors. Really, you don't really have that much influence over ranking. Focus on making sure that your content is there, that your website is fast, that your server holds up, that you don't have any weird problems, and then you'll be fine. Trust me, this is going to be fine. Even with the content, that's something that usually you might want to talk to your sales or marketing department about. Maybe you have an SEO on your team who can help you with this. SEOs are usually pretty good first points of contact when it comes to making sure that your content is good. Investing in copywriters is also usually a great idea. And sometimes when I talk to developers and I remind myself of how I experienced my life as a developer with SEOs on board, either as an agency or on the team, sometimes SEOs ask you to do things that are not great for the user. That's not a good practice. Generally speaking, all of our goals should basically align. Because if you think about it, I, as a developer, build websites so that people are using it. Maybe in the next Google, Facebook, Microsoft, whatever, right? That's what I'm striving for. I have a fantastic product and I want people to use that. Now, where do I get new people from? Well, I can use marketing campaigns and ads, but who loves ads as much? I mean, if I'm looking for something new, I'm very likely going through a search engine. Around half of the traffic on the web usually comes from search engines. So if you are seeing only 10% of the people who come to your website the first time are coming from organic search engines, that usually means that you are leaving free traffic out there. So like people who could potentially be on your website and should potentially be on your website are not, because there's something in the way. Either your content is misleading and doesn't look like what you're trying to do or say with it, or there's a technical problem. Those are the two main factors when the organic search traffic doesn't add up. So you want to find, you want new users to find your content, your website, your web app, your social network, whatever it is you're building. And Google search, we as a search engine, we want to show good and relevant content to users looking for that content. So if there are users looking for your social network or your e-commerce shop or whatever it is, or your blog articles on some topic, and your articles are good and your products are great, we want these products and blog articles to be visible to the people looking for them. So this kind of aligns, right? You want new people to come to your stuff. We want good stuff to show to people. So if you're building good stuff, we should want to show your website to them. And SEOs are kind of, good SEOs anyways, are in the middle of that. They are, excuse me, they are making sure that what we do as a search engine and what you do as a web developer works together, aligns, so that new people who want your content can actually find your content and consume your content through search engines and get to your website through search engines. So you see, like, it kind of aligns, like search engines want to do this, you want to do this, and then SEOs should help you get these two things to be the same. Great. There are also not so great SEOs, and they usually apply shady tactics or things that are not exactly in the user's interest to try to game the system. That oftentimes sounds very easy and like a great bang for the buck. It's like, oh yeah, we pay them a little bit and then they do links or whatever. Usually in the longer term, that backfires, because if you're gaming the system too obviously, we might possibly penalize you by not showing you on search results or not showing you very high on search results. It might also be that this eventually like hurts you in the longer run differently by just like lower rankings and stuff. Just try to think of what your users need, what your users want, how they, not you, how they think about it and how they search for things. And SEOs are experienced in that field and help you if they are good at what they are doing. Let me give you an example. Before we get into technical SEO, I want to give you an example to highlight why I have been mentioning content multiple times at this point. I'm a breakfast person. I love my breakfast, and I usually have toast for breakfast. However, my toaster broke down, so I need a new toaster. If I were to come to this website, would this be a good website for me to find a new toaster? I don't know. Looking at the image, maybe this might actually be a toaster. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks roughly like a toaster. But then I might read the second most prominent thing, which says smart, simple, beautiful. Sounds very fancy, but means nothing. Nada, zilch, nothing, gar nicht, right? Because smart, simple, beautiful, this could be about a phone, this could be about sunglasses, this could be about pretty much anything. Smart, simple, beautiful. It could be about a car, it could be about a boat. Who cares? This is, I don't know, this means nothing to me looking for a toaster. It will disrupt your breakfast. Bad. I don't want my breakfast disrupted. I don't know how much cocaine the marketing department took for this one, but I'm not interested. I want a peaceful, nice breakfast. Thermochemical food processing. What does that mean? Does it cook my bread? Is this a rice cooker? I don't know. Best invention since sliced bread. That's a wink towards toaster, but I'm still not sure. If we look further on this website, it says hot bread. I still might be a toaster, but I don't even know. Let's see, what else do we have? Links. Home. Okay, I'm guessing I am on home. Our philosophy. I had Latin in school. I read lots of philosophers. Great stuff. Definitely, if you're bored, read some of them. But I want a toaster, so not a philosophy. Not interested. Hot bread X10. What is the, I don't even know what the hot bread is yet. What's an hot bread X10? Is that good? Is that bad? Is that infectious? I don't know. Join the movement. I am not interested in changing my religion. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So you see, the design is clean and fancy. And this is actually based on some real world websites I've seen that were wondering why they weren't showing up in search results. Clean. The website loads super fast, uses the latest version of React, Angular, Vue, whatever, don't care. uses the latest, coolest thing, whatever, loads in under a second, has HTTPS, is mobile friendly, but the content is not great. I as a human don't understand that this is potentially a website about toasters. I still don't know that for sure. So let's just not touch the design or the technology, just change the content. Bam. The fastest toaster. There we go. Now we're talking. This is a toaster. I'll be the happiest man on earth. I'll have a toaster. This toaster also never burns my toast. That's amazing. It gets me my toast faster. I love that. That's efficient. I'm German. I like efficiency. Try 𝗏𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧, cool. But I'm also a software engineer, and in that as an engineer, so I'm like, I need to make sure that I choose the right toaster. So I need criteria to choose the right toaster, but I don't know what these criteria would be like. But conveniently, they have a link that says how to choose a toaster. So there's an article explaining how to choose a toaster. That's nice. That's helping. Maybe I disagree with their methodology, but that's fine because I can then use what they give me as input and adjust it to my needs. If this hot bread, or sorry, in this case, it's called 𝗏𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧, isn't the right product, that's not a problem because they have other toasters. Our toasters takes me to other products. Great. So I can learn. Once I have established my criteria, I can compare the different products along my criteria. That's great. And then the call to action is buy a toaster. That's what I'm trying to do. Jackpot. I can buy a toaster. This is fantastic. I love this website. Best thing ever. And it's the same technology. It's the same design. Everything is the same, including the images, including the color scheme, the design, everything is the same, except the content is a ton better. And I would wish if there was one thing that people would do after my presentations, it should be look at their content through the eyes of someone trying to get what they're trying to offer, right? If you're offering toasters, make your website say so. If you're offering boat rides on a lake in the Caribbean, fantastic, make your freaking website say so. Not like in our history as the oldest company on this little island. I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic, but what are you trying to sell me? And there's so many products and services that are not telling me what exactly they're saying. And it's fine to have multiple landing pages for different people looking for different things that all is covered through a product. So you have one product, but you have like 10 landing pages where you tell people from their perspective, what is this product doing? That's fine. Just make that clear to the user. Because if you're not doing that, any technical SEO, any technical optimizations, any design optimizations, anything like that, any link building, whatever, is going to be unsuccessful at best if your content is chocolate ice cream emoji. So yeah, but anyway, we're developers, let's talk about technology. I promised you technical SEO, so let's talk about technical SEO. But please don't forget the rest is also important. First things first, and I can't believe I have to say this, but I have to say this, so bear with me. The next two things that we're going to discuss are fundamentals, but people do get them wrong quite often. First things first, you should have URLs for each piece of content that you care for. If it's a page that describes your product, if there's another page that lets people sign up for your product or shows the different pricing or information, each of these need a URL that explains that and is reachable, because Googlebot, as well as other search engines, they operate by URLs. They get a URL from somewhere and then they look at that URL. Content that isn't reachable through a URL is probably not visible to us. A good URL is a host, like example.com/some path, maybe some file name, fine. It can also have fragments, like the hashtag subsection. But do you know what fragments are for? I give you a tip. If you have a very, very long Wikipedia article, for instance, that's a very long piece of content, and you want to address specifically this part here, and there's like a heading history. This is the Wikipedia page on jam, for example, and you want the history of jam. Fantastic, very exciting, probably. I actually haven't read that. Then you can like link to en.wikipedia.org/wiki/jam #history, which means it takes you to a piece of content that is on the page. It doesn't change the page content. If I leave out the hashtag history, I still get the entire content. So search engines kind of ignore the fragment because it's just a piece of content. So we might show that in search results, But we're not going to crawl that. We're not going to get the content if that content changes using the hash, right? We're going to ignore that part. Now, when we invented single page applications in, I don't know, like 2011, 10, something like that, we needed a way to run JavaScript when something on the page was clicked, but not, or when the URL changed, but not triggering a reload, because we wanted to avoid reloads. So we used hashes. We just used them incorrectly. We used a hack. So whenever the hash changes, we get a JavaScript event, and then we like run an AJAX call. So basically, we fetch some API, and then we show the updated content. Fantastic, great, lovely. However, the downside of that is that we are using fragments for something they weren't meant for. We are loading different content when the fragment changes, which we shouldn't. We felt bad about this, so we came up with the hash exclamation mark thing, which kind of says like, it's kind of a hash fragment, but it's not really a hash fragment. Sorry, maybe. So that's something that is a little tricky to deal with, and you should not do this. So how can you build single page applications then if you can't just use fragments? Well, there is the history API that has pretty great browser support. And if you are on a browser that doesn't support it, you should just do a full reload, because then these browsers are definitely not great for JavaScript applications to begin with. You get clean URLs and you get control over the browser history without dealing with full page refreshes. So I highly recommend using History API if you want to build a single page application. When we checked, and you're like, yeah, this is kind of obvious. Why is Martin talking about this? When we ran a big crawl last year for the Web Almanach, we found that 12% of the landing pages of single page apps that we crawled actually do use fragment URLs still. Angular and Vue have changed their default mode in the routers. So if you are starting a new Angular project or a new React project, you get history mode API, history API mode routing by default. For Vue.js in the Vue router, you still have to change it, I think, from hash to I think what they call HTML5 mode or something. So 12% is 12% too much. That's not making me very happy. And this is the next thing that I can't believe we have to talk about, but we should definitely talk about this. Links matter. Links have been the killer feature when the web came into existence at the beginning. The whole point of being able to click on something and going to some other document on the web, fantastic stuff. This is how you do links. You do an A tag, an href, and a URL. This can be a relative URL. That's fine. Googlebot is smart enough to prefix it with your host. That's not a problem. You can also totally, absolutely have a an on-click handler on that. That's not a problem. That's absolutely fine. But don't throw away the rest of the link. You still need to have an A tag. You still need to have an href attribute with a URL. That's the basics. This way, we can go through the HTML, find these URLs, in this case /stuff, and then crawl that in the next iteration. So if you want us to see your pages on your application, on your single page app, on your website, doesn't matter. You have to have a link to them. This is technically a link, but not helpful for search engines. We don't click on things. Googlebot doesn't click on things. So this link goes nowhere, so it is ignored by search engine crawlers. Again, this link goes to the current page. Not working. This one doesn't go anywhere. It calls JavaScript function. You can't really put that in your address bar in a new tab and then go there. So we can't crawl this. So again, this is not a working link. I mean, bonus points for creativity, but no. That's not a link. The rule of thumb is if it does something on the current page, which Googlebot doesn't really care about, if it does something on the current page, that's a button. If it takes you to another piece of content, that should probably be a link. That's the worst you can do. That's not an interactive element. You're having an on-click handler here, but screen readers probably don't work. Yeah, but I can throw ARIA things on it. Yes, you can, or you can just use a freaking link. There's a reason there is a link element. Just use the link element. Don't use spans or divs for interactive elements, such as links in this case. And also this, again, does not have a URL to go to, so no. Please don't do that. Please ignore all of this stuff, don't do it. If you have been doing it, feel a little bad about it, and maybe consider changing it to links with href attributes so that Google crawler as well as other crawlers can actually crawl it, and screen readers do work with them as well. Sweet. So that we have, now that we have that out of the way, that's fantastic. If you're building client-side applications, client-side rendered single-page applications or web applications in general, you might find yourself noticing that sometimes SEOs come to you and say like, I can't see the content if I view source. It looks like this. Isn't that a problem for SEO? If they don't know the answer by now, you can tell them it is not a problem, because what happens in Googlebot, at least, I can't really speak for other search engines, but at least for Googlebot, I can tell you, we do have an extra step, which is rendering. Rendering is pretty fast, works with a headless Chrome. And what we do is basically we load your website in a headless Chrome, and then we run all the JavaScript, and then the JavaScript generates all the content, and then we see all the content, hopefully. Unless you're doing something wrong, we should be seeing all your content. So this isn't per se a problem. Render time, sometimes SEOs get very nervous about that. It can take weeks. No. That has been like, I don't even know how to, a rumor basically, because we looked at the data, we actually have the data. It takes 5 seconds at median, and the 90th percentile is within minutes. So it doesn't take that long to wait for us to have rendering resources available. Sometimes people get nervous about, oh my God, Googlebot uses Chrome 41. No, that's also not true anymore. Since May last year, May 2019, we are using an evergreen Googlebot. So Googlebot uses a Chrome browser that is more or less up to date with the current stable version, which at the time of this meetup here is Chrome 83. Whenever a new version comes out, within a few weeks, usually we update. It might take a little longer, but give or take 1 or 2 versions, we are within main stable. The testing tools are also using the current version of Googlebot, so you'll get consistent results everywhere. Which also means Googlebot supports web components. Sometimes people ask me about web components. We do support web components, it's fine. But web components are not always the same. So not all web components are equal. In this case, here we have a web component that puts something in its shadow DOM saying, hello, shadow DOM. And then the person using this web component says, hello, light DOM inside the component. What do we see? Well, what happens is that if you think about it, the shadow DOM overrides the light DOM. So in this shadow DOM, there's only hello shadow DOM. There's no place for the light DOM to go. There's no place for the text that the person who uses the component has put inside the component where that could be living. So we would actually not really see this. We would only see what's in the shadow DOM in this case. That isn't exactly great, because if a search engine that does not support JavaScript comes along, it might see hello light DOM, but then a search engine that does support JavaScript might see hello shadow DOM. That can create problems. The best way to design web components in that case is to give it a way to take the light DOM and project it into the shadow DOM, or move it into the shadow DOM. One way of doing that is the slot element. Here we see that shadow DOM, and then it says slot. Slot basically takes whatever fits the selector. Here there is no selector, so everything from the light DOM is taken and projected into the shadow DOM. So even if we render shadow DOM, we still get the content from the light DOM, and the person who wrote the web component gets control over where that light DOM goes. So when we have this component that says I'm shadow DOM and then has a slot, and then the component is used with I'm light DOM as light DOM text inside, then we are seeing shadow DOM, light DOM. So that's, well, actually we are seeing I'm shadow DOM. I have a typo on the slide. So, and I'm light DOM as well. But you see, like, we see both of these things in our component in the rendered HTML, and that's what we would use for indexing. So that's not a problem. Also, a low-hanging fruit that most people are not using yet is using native lazy loading. Lazy loading makes things faster. Google supports it. And in this case, actually, every search engine supports it, because it's just an HTML image or just an iframe. Iframe is non-standard behavior, but images are being standardized as a web standard now. And the loading lazy means that it only loads the image once it becomes visible in the viewport. So it saves the user's bandwidth, and it saves the loading time, and that makes things faster. Generally, it unblocks the main thread quicker, doesn't download things unnecessarily, and it works pretty much in every browser because it's backwards compatible, and it is great for search engines as well because they are supporting it, or if they don't support it, they still get the image. That's not a problem. You can also build it for other elements, like if you want to load specific content only lazily, that's absolutely possible. Just don't do it just on scroll. We don't really scroll in Googlebot, at least. You probably want to use an intersection observer that gives you a more performant, more standardized way of loading content as it is about to become visible. Much better solution than any like weird thing. There's a bunch of libraries that do this really well. A bunch of them using intersections observers when available and falling back to other techniques if not available. But there's a bunch of libraries that do this well, but do test them also for Googlebot and other search engines. Another thing that we see quite a lot is what we call soft errors. So now you search for something, and in the search results you see this, an error occurred in the search results, and we're like, oh, that's not great. This is my website. Why is this showing up for my website? What likely happened is if I go to a website or to a page on a website that doesn't exist, like 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 on this cat website, as a user, I do see an error message. Everything is fine. As a developer, I'm like, yeah, my job here is done. Error message is shown. Fantastic. But if this is a client-side rendered web application, there is a good chance that the server actually says otherwise. The server says 200 OK, which means it's cool. This page exists. There's content. Go for it. Normally, Googlebot is quite good at fetching or catching these errors and seeing like, hold on, this page doesn't have that much content, and the content looks like an error message. So we might consider actually not putting this in the index, and that would mean it wouldn't show up in the search results. But sometimes things go through, and if you make a computer guess, you know what happens when you make computers guess, right? As a developer, when I say like, you know what I meant, the computer doesn't care. It does what it thinks is right. So don't make Googlebot guess. Give us a 404. But how do you do this in a client-side rendered single-page application? If this is my code, I have a component and a router maybe. The router has an error state and then shows a page that says, oopsie, there's nothing here. Or if in this case, I make an API call to api.quick&Martin/cats and then the ID from the URL, in this case, would lol know, or lol would know. And then I get the JSON, and then I check if the field exists is set to true. It is not. And then I show an error message. But the server has served this piece of content already with a 200 OK because it doesn't know which pages exist. Only the JavaScript figures this one out by making that API call. So we're kind of screwed, aren't we? Actually, no, we're not. We should set up our server. We should have one specific URL, like in this case, 𝗏𝗏𝗘𝗦. If anything goes to 𝗏𝗏𝗘𝗦, it gets a 404. That's the only URL that is configured on the server to be different from a 200 OK. This is definitely always giving us a 404. In which case, we can just redirect, even using JavaScript. That's fine. So what would happen is Googlebot sees this URL somewhere for some reason. Maybe the cat existed once, and then goes there, crawls it, gets a 200 OK, gets a bunch of stuff back, renders it, the JavaScript runs, figures out this cat doesn't exist, redirects us to this other URL. So we crawl that URL instead, and then see a 404. So we're like, so this page here, the 𝗏𝗏𝗘𝗦, actually just redirects here. So we don't really need this page. So we can just like throw it out. And then the page where we land from the redirect, that gives us a 404. So that's not something that we would put in the index either. And then you're done. That's it. Whoosh. This will not end up in the index. There's an alternative using robots meta tags, but be careful with those. They are pretty heavy foot guns. You want to make sure that you're not doing something scary. I don't have infinite time, unfortunately, but we have a fantastic guide on this that I wrote and I keep maintaining. It's under goo.gle/js-seo-basics. If you want to see this in video form, that's also perfectly possible. We have a JavaScript SEO video series. The first season has 8 episodes and is already out. The second season will be filmed later, probably next year, unfortunately, due to circumstances of all of this, while we are doing this virtually now. So yeah, definitely check out the guide, definitely check out the videos for more information, also on different frameworks, what you should be doing. Yeah. And now, last but not least, before I answer the questions that you have, test your pages. You probably are hopefully running some sort of unit tests. You probably do some manual testing. You might use something like Cypress or Selenium to test or Puppeteer to test your pages as well. All of this is great. You probably use Lighthouse. I guess everyone here has at least like once looked into Lighthouse probably. Or you might use like Web Page Test or PageSpeed Insights, one of these many fantastic tools. There are a few fantastic debugging and testing tools for Google search as well. Here, for instance, you see a JavaScript error message that happens when Googlebot visits your site. In this case, the service worker registration doesn't work because Googlebot disables service workers. It doesn't completely ignore them. It basically has support for service workers, but then when you try to register one, it rejects that promise. The reason is that people coming to your website the first time through Google search will not have the service worker installed, so neither should we. If you want to find out things like that, you can use tools such as ngrok or local tunnel to get your local development environment available online for a temporary time, and then plug that URL into our testing tools, such as the mobile-friendly test. Mobile-friendly test does one very obvious thing. It tells you if your website is mobile-friendly. Great, but it does much more. It shows you which resources have been fetched, which resources have been downloaded, which ones have failed, and why have they failed. Did you set up robots.txt so that we can't get your content? You would find that out here. You can see a screenshot of the above the fold, what we see on the page. That is actually not as interesting as the rendered HTML. You see the HTML that we will use to index. So you know exactly if it shows up in the rendered HTML, you should be fine. If it doesn't show up in the rendered HTML, that's something that you want to investigate. That's one testing tool. The other fantastic testing tool is the Search Console. This one is different from the previous one because it looks at your entire website, so all the pages on your website, and also you would have to verify that you own the domain that you're testing. So this can't really be done with temporary domains, but you can debug and monitor things that are in production, live online on the internet. It gives you things like usability issues, security issues, any errors that occurred, if we see your structured data, how your website performs, how fast it is according to the core web vitals. So it's like a bunch of really cool metrics and reports, and it also emails you proactively if we see a problem that wasn't there before. And all of these tools are free. There's a third one that I haven't talked about much because I haven't talked about structured data much, but if you're using structured data, definitely check out the rich results test as well. That gives you pretty much the same information as the mobile friendly test, plus minus the mobile usability. That's what it doesn't do, but it gives you information over structured data as well. Sweet. So these are 3 fantastic free tools that everyone should be using every now and then. I'm not saying you should use them every day, but every now and then to just check how your website is doing in Google search is definitely helping you. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I know that SEO is not a topic that everyone is like inherently interested in, but I would happily take the questions now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Martin. We have a few questions here for sure.
Sure.
Two are very specific. One is more general, so I will start with a more general one, and that is that does the presence of JSON linked data or LD provide improve ranking?
It does not, but it does make your website eligible for what we call rich results. So these are results that are highlighted a little more, like with an image, or if it's a recipe, then we show the preparation time and stuff like that. It might also bring your website into things like Google Assistant. So it does help you be more engaging in the search results, but it does not mean any ranking advantage.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question is more specific, and it is connected to the URL structure, which should be used, or which is better. I don't know whether you can see it, but I can read it out loud.
I can see
yeah.
I can see the question.
Yeah. So whether it's /product/ some product ID /toaster, or some variation of this with dashes, or with some permutation of those words between the slashes. Does it have any relevance in this context at all?
It doesn't really have that much relevance because everyone does it slightly differently, and as a ranking factor, it would be pretty useless. I personally think whatever makes most sense for your specific case. If you are selling like lots of different kinds of products, like toasters and I don't know, microwaves and ovens and whatever, then I would probably say it makes sense to have /products/category, and then you can have a category page that tells the user what kind of products you are even offering, right? Because if I go to like /products/1255 and then it's like a toaster and then I change the ID and then I end up with a microwave and I'm like, huh? So don't worry too much about these things. They matter not as much as people think. It's more important how do you structure your website from a user's point of view? How does the journey look like? How do you link from one page to the other? That's more important than the specific URL structure. I think it makes sense, especially if you have multiple categories, to use like products, category, and then product ID or product name. But that's up to you in the end.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Thank you. And the last one here is that Google doesn't show a side links of my page in results. Is there something I can do? Maybe for a little bit of context, what is side links?
So side links is, if you remember what I showed you when I said like, oh, this is an error. So you have like a website and then you have the most common links below it. Like, I don't know, if you go to some web shop, then you probably have the different product categories as what's called site links. Site links are, as far as I'm aware, a organic feature. So we try to figure it out from your website, like structure, which means that if we have a hard time understanding how your website is structured by, for instance, not having a good navigation that links from one place to another and like gives us an idea of how the website structure looks like, then we can't really generate site links. If your structure makes sense to us, we are generally pretty good at figuring out site links eventually. But as I said, it's an organic feature. We might choose not to create site links.
Great. I have a few questions on my own, if
Sure.
you allow. First is regarding the AMP. AMP is a technology. It was created by Google. So how does the adoption of this technology by developers on their websites affects the ranking or the SEO?
So AMP itself is not a ranking factor. It's not a ranking factor, and you can see that for specific queries that you run. I actually oftentimes get, if I'm looking for specific articles, I get the actual article before the AMP version because it's faster. That can happen. AMP is just one way of getting a fast website if you do things right in AMP. And it gives you like this little badge. It gives this little
the bolt.
I think it's like a lightning bolt. Yeah, I think that's what it is. So this is the only thing. We were experimenting back then. We were like, okay, so how can we give people who are caring about the speed of things a little bit of more visibility in the sense? That was an experiment. The badges are still there. That's what it is. For a bunch of technical reasons, the top stories, if you are a news publisher, are currently an AMP-only feature as far as I'm aware, but we are dropping this requirement because we have found better ways to measure performance for new sites. So once the page experience update rolls out in 2021, top stories won't be AMP-only content anymore.
Thank you. And what's the penalty for not having valid HTML? Like the HTML, it is pretty common that most of the HTMLs have errors because the pages are big. The HTML is auto-generated by some JavaScript framework or whatever. Is there some penalty or does Google?
There's absolutely no penalty. There's no penalty, and it's not a ranking factor if your HTML is valid or not. However, that being said, if your HTML is mostly correct or even completely correct, there is a higher chance that we understand the semantics of your content. If all we get is a bunch of divs, then we're like, I don't know what piece of this content is more important than the other, or what's the structure of this. We will index that, and we will probably also rank that. But if you are structuring your content for your users using headlines or bolding or whatever, this helps us as Googlebot, or us as Google as well. It helps Googlebot understand the semantics of your page, and the semantics are kind of important to understand what your page is about. So there's no penalty per se. It's just the more you make us guess, the more likely we are to guess wrong, or the more likely we are to miss out on something that you think is really cool and important about the content. So the more semantic information you give us, the better it is.
And maybe last question from me is that is regarding the performance and the optimizing your web page specifically for the Googlebot. Like, for example, skipping part of the content, which is really hard to render on the server, for example, and it may not be that relevant. It's maybe something fancy for marketing purposes, but it wouldn't make much sense for Google to index it or crawl it. And I will serve this content to a Googlebot, but I will not to a user, for example. What's the overall, like, your mindset about this? Is this something which it's probably not encouraged much, but it may be like a logical conclusion when you have a performance problem, for example?
It depends is the answer. I've heard these questions in various variations many times. So first things first, generally speaking, as long as you're just leaving out content that you think is less relevant, and do not mislead the user, as in, like, say to Google about this website is about kittens, and then in reality it's about, I don't know, selling online medication or something like that. If you do that, if you mislead the user, that's called cloaking. We catch that, that gets a penalty usually. I do not recommend doing that. It's against our guidelines. And if you leave out content that is less relevant, and don't serve it to Googlebot, or only serve it to Googlebot, then I don't think we're gonna pay as much attention to it, and it's mostly going to be fine. It won't exactly help you with performance problems as much either, because we are looking at field data as well for the page speed signals. So your rankings, if you're like, oh, page speed is a ranking factor, so we're just gonna, like, only serve a little bit of the main content to Googlebot so we are fast, and then for users it's slow, we're gonna see that in field data. And then field data means that we are seeing that real people are experiencing slow website from you, and that's not going to help you. So, and again, field data is only one part of the page speed signal. So I would discourage this practice, because it might not have the benefits that you think it has. You can do it. I just feel like you would invest a lot of time in making that solution work with not that much of a benefit.
So it's a better practice to just improve
make your website fast.
Page, overall, not just specifically for the bot.
Yes.
Great. Thank you a lot. The last question from the audience is whether you can share your slides.
As I said in the beginning, unfortunately, it's against Google policy. I can't share the slides.
Yeah.
But I think this was recorded.
Yeah, it was recorded. So for the person who was asking this in the chat, there will be recording. It will be posted on the social media of the Reactive meetups, and as well as on the Slack. So stay tuned. It will be there in no time. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Martin, for joining us. It was a great introduction to technical SEO. I have opened the Understand the JavaScript SEO Basics done by guy who looks really similar to you, I have to say. So let's see. Maybe it's your secret brother. So
awesome, yeah.
Thank you. If you are in Europe, have a great night and evening.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for joining us. Enjoy.
You're welcome.
Thanks. You. For the rest of you who are still here, let's conclude this meetup. Thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to the wonderful speakers for inspiring us and showing us some their view on the topics which are really hot right now. I would like to join you to invite you to join us for our next meetup. It will be our 7th meetup, and it will be on July the 7th. And in Europe, it will be at 7 p.m. So quite easy to remember, isn't it? And who will be joining us? This will be a special edition because we will be joined by 11 communities, developer communities from all around the world, which will give and present what they are working on and to give a lightning talk. So stay tuned. You can ask them some questions, maybe join them. Maybe you are able to contribute. Maybe they are actually in your city. So a lot of inspiration will be there. And for those who are following the ReactiveConf for a while, as a speaker, that talk will be done by 𝗬𝗓𝗓𝗏. And he was having a lightning talk at the Reactive conference in 2017, I believe, about GraphQL. And this will be still the topic. So his talk is called GraphQL Mesh, why GraphQL between services is the worst idea and the best idea at the same time. So stay polarized, stay tuned, and join us on the July the 7th for the 7th meetup. Thank you all, and have a great day or evening or night, wherever you are. Thank you again. Cheers.